Hanoi's old quarter is renowned for its small tube houses sitting tightly packed beside each other. The tube houses are built on narrow plots of land of about 3 to 6 meters, but they often stretch far back. Some are up to 100 meters long. At the beginning of the 20th century, the old quarter was an agglomeration of specialized trade and craftsworks, home to craftsmen from the villages surrounding Hanoi. These people produce and trade traditional handicrafts. The names of the old quarter street still bear this history: Hàng Đào, Hàng Bạc, Hàng Thùng. During the colonial era, on a large piece of land right at the corner of the old quarter arose an industrial workshop, manufacturing a product from the West. This unusual story begins in the early day of the 20th century. Along the Nhuệ River, about 20 kilometers from Hanoi, is the village of Cự Đà in the Thanh Oai district of the old Hà Đông province. Perhaps due to its strategic location along a river which at that time served as a means of transportation, Cự Đà village gave birth to many talented businessmen, many of whom had prosperous career in Hanoi. One of the most successful among them is Mr. Gioanh, who was born in 1882. In 1910, he moved to Hà Đông, where he launched his career as a businessman. This period was the heyday of the Đông Kinh Nghĩa Thục, a patriotic movement led by a group of Confucian scholars. For centuries, traditional Vietnamese scholars had despised commerce, ranking it the lowest occupation in the Confucian social hierarchy: scholar, farmer, worker, and merchant. However, the scholars who formed the Đông Kinh Nghĩa Thục movement held unorthodox views. They promoted Vietnamese commerce, which they saw as an economic means to fight the French. Among the members of this movement was the governor of Thái Bình province, Mr. Nghiêm Xuân Quang. He was both a respected Confucian scholar and a famous silk merchant in Hanoi. He owned a properties on today's Hàng Quạt, Fan Street. For a long time, there had been a small lake in the middle of the urban block where the governor's property was located. This spatial configuration had in fact long been characteristic of the old quarter, but during the late 19th and early 20th century, as craft production and trade developed, the inhabitants of the old quarters extended their tube houses further and further towards the back of their plots, until the lakes at the core of the urban blocks disappeared. Governor Nghiêm Xuân Quang owned some of the unbuilt land which remained inside his urban block. In 1933, he sold that land to Mr. Gioanh, who set up an industrial workshop on it. He named it Cự Doanh in memories of his home village, Cự Đà. Naming one's business after one's village was a common practice among Vietnamese, a way to honor their origins. For example, the Cự Trung business on Hàng Bông Street, owned by another merchant from Cự Đà village. Cự Doanh was one of Vietnam's most advanced industrial textile producers at the time, with machines imported from France and 200 workers. The products it manufactured were closely associated with the modernization process, which was radically transforming Vietnamese society at the time. These changes affected nearly every aspect of life in Hanoi, but the transformation of architecture and fashion was particularly visible. While the tube houses of the traditional craftsmen were long and narrow and usually faced the street for convenient trading, the Cự Doanh textile workshop occupied a large piece of land in the middle of an urban block. The contrast between traditional craft and modern industry in the old quarter went beyond the built form. Their production and trading methods were also very different. Vietnamese clothes had traditionally been made from silk fabric. In colonial time, the main axis of the old quarter was a busy street selling fabric named Silk Street, Hàng Đào. But unlike traditional silk, the fabric produced by the Cự Doanh workshop was not manually woven on looms. Instead, it uses machines to produce a new type of textile introduced to Vietnam by the French in the early 20th century: knitted clothing. Gioanh knitwear was sold not only in Hanoi but also in Saigon. The clothes produced by Cự Doanh were associated with the modern entertainment activities embraced by urban Vietnamese at the time. For example, Cự Doanh swimwear for men or Cự Trung swimwear for women. Cự Doanh knitwear was also sold in other remote French colonies. Some say that Gioanh Văn Mai and his Gioanh Textile Workshop fathered Vietnam's knitting industry. Thanks to his blossoming business, the Gioanh became one of Hanoi's wealthiest families. They were among the rare Hanoians who owned a car at this time. Successful businessmen, such as Mr. Gioanh Văn Mai, introduced the architecture they saw in the city in their home village. While the layout of Gioanh resembles that of the rural settlements in the Red River Delta. The village features several houses built with a distinct style, mixing elements of vernacular and colonial residential architecture. Today, Vietnamese often refer to this mixed style as French architecture. Gioanh Textile Workshop was nationalized in 1959. 20 years later, Deputy Prime Minister Đỗ Mười declared the factory a triumph of the peaceful socialist re-education policy toward the private industrialists and commercialists. In the 1990s, Gioanh was renamed Thăng Long Knitwear Company. It continued to operate in the old quarter until 2007, the year it was relocated outside of the city. Its industrial facilities have since been demolished and replaced by a new secondary school. The history of the Gioanh Textile Factory reflects the change and development of a traditional Asian handicraft city experienced during a transitional period. The factory is also the testimony of a generation of talented Vietnamese businessmen who, starting in the early 20th century, put in motion a process of transformation of the Vietnamese economy, society, and politics, which is still ongoing.